That's right. We're still here. Crickets. Everyone thinks it's all cool. Those that don't still think it's cool because we're not really doing anything properly. We're acting out as we do every time. And that's been expected. And we're just following into the expectation. As I've said long ago, what struck me, something I'd, in all my innocence and striking out in the world, you get what the world's your oyster stuff. Yeah, that myth was there's people out there that know you better than yourself. And I found that out after reading the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, whatever that document is considered. It was very instructive, like lots of these documents can be. And explain to me that there's people out there all over the place, it seems, that are out there to exploit people. And they study you, how to exploit you. And as I've learned over decades now, they're there. They do that. And they've learned their craft very well. And we, the people, have not learned their craft so well that we can stop it at this point. And I've come with my observations, certainly not the only ones, but to my mind, the only ones that seem viable at this point, to anticipate what we're seeing here this year, to resolve how to, once it became clear, there was, again, you have to wait for the head fake and watch the body instead, and once you saw the body go in the direction, then you could commit. I did that back in March, and then I started to explain how people would counter it. So I've been trying to identify for you this thing that most people don't see. It's all been there. It's all been building itself. It's this cancer that's been building in. And all using what you don't know about yourself and your limitations. And yes, we all have them. And so there's players everywhere. And I don't mean on the stage. I mean, this is a war. And this is a war like no one, I think, has ever seen. And it's been planned that way, so it comes underneath your scrutiny. Oh, you sense it. You see it. You don't like it. But you don't understand it really to fight it, and you won't fight it. In fact, lots of excuses to not fight it are developed. And again, properly so. I look back in the last 15 years or 20 years here now. Well, I knew this before as well. I don't like any of this. It's like I keep saying how much I don't like all this paperwork that I help people write. I hate it. But it's necessary. And it's necessary for a valid reason. It means your life. It literally means your life anymore. And if people can't see that, I don't know what to say. If you think that tearing, like I just saw someone in New York in fact, we have a story probably coming here, the report, tearing up your ticket. If you think that's protesting, you're not getting it. And most people don't get it. And it's not that I'm putting a judgment. I just see that we're not responding, and that's the proof. I don't have to really say any more. And so I've been trying to come, as I keep saying trying, I've been coming every weekend, to give my insight, to give my observations, to anticipate what I can that I see. Do I know it all? Absolutely not. Can I tell it all? Am I an oracle? No way. This is just responding to what's already been written, how they've responded, the historical sense of it all, how it keeps repeating. The history repeats itself because the people are known better than themselves. That's why this repeats itself. And so I'm already off a bit here, but I guess what I'm focusing on is my very first presentation here to you today is a video, and I want to play a moment or two. Today's their videos are coming through. I hope they come out well. A couple minutes each. They need to be presented that way for more context. And you're going to see here again, and I don't know the veracity of any of this. I reported on Millie Weaver a while back, and here a month ago, just didn't even hear. I ran across it. It happened. She's been exonerated. What I found interesting in her video, reporting that on the steps, was what happened to her after she got arrested. And it reminded me of when I say analyzing the battlefield, this really isn't a joke. And preparing yourself for the future action that you're taking is non-inconsequential, the obligation you have. In fact, this week was a bit of a challenge, working through a problem that was known but not executed on properly. And the adversary, if you will, it is an adversary, took advantage of that. And so it took quite an effort to figure out a way through to at least stabilize the problem and not have it be a fatal wound in the give and take of an adversarial contest. As I said, read the black and white and don't disregard it, because if you do, it'll come back, could come back to bite you, and then it might if you don't have enough in your psyche to understand why that might be there and how to really work around it. Anyway, so this Millie Weaver, she was exonerated on whatever those charges were. I didn't get too deep in it. It did look like that she was being hit because of that. The report that she had done, that I played and reported on here, or explained, that it was interesting what she says when I'm going to play here, of who didn't have her back at the time. And this is the kind of thing that hit my mind, was these are the people, when you're looking out for people that you're going to work with, you have to find people that have your back, literally, not tritely, not as a phrase. In other words, as I talk to my colleagues, we've come to this idea. You just come to this idea about the fact that, and it comes out periodically, that the people I work with, I would trust in a foxhole. I trust them to have my back. I trust them to be in the same spot to do what we need to do. And their capacity is different in a different way. They have a different capability, but I trust them to be there. And we're going to hear this Millie Weaver explain something here, which maybe not a shock, but it's just interesting to me. How we have to be careful of what's going on. How many people have bought into these players, if you will, counter intel pro, whatever the heck you want to call that stuff. All these fancy words you put on the deception. And it requires that we understand who we can work with and who we can't. And I'm playing this part because I want you to understand that this is what's out in the world. And when the chips are down, you're going to find you have very little cover and very little of anybody that has your back. And so I noticed this stuff, not necessarily so dire. I notice it in little ways. Like you can't keep people together to focus in one area. You try to pull things together, and then there's subversion that comes in, and you realize how difficult the deceivers in the world, how difficult it's become. And we become our own deceivers is another thing. And I may touch on this later on in the broadcast in a comment. That, as I've told you, when you're listening to what I say, you can't stand for, as Sound Minds has identified, and I saw a chat afterwards, what people stick around for 12 minutes. You can't get behind a woodshed for 12 minutes. It's just not going to work. That you come with your thoughts, which I don't have a problem with, but when you're not listening to what I'm saying, and then you insert what actually is the reason why I'm talking, and you call what I'm saying to be an objection, you're not listening. And you're also not hearing what's going on in the dynamic of what we're working up against, what's up against us. It's not just the reset. It's not just the vaccine. It's like almost everything now. And so I don't know what to say to people at some point. When they come and have a counter opinion, I'm explaining a condition. It's spoken to you all because we have to do something. We just don't talk about it and have an opinion on how we ought to be the other way or how we're going to be destroyed. Yeah, that's the reason why I'm talking. We're going to be destroyed. We can focus on that, but we can start understanding that we're in some trouble. We're in a group of people globally now that are absolutely ineffectual in responding. Only a very small percentage can do any of it. We're going to hear some of this as well in this broadcast when I get there. That we may be trying to rely on people, and we're going to notice that we have no cover. There's nobody to cover our back. And all the excuses come up for that. And then I look at it and say, well, whatever that was, we still have a bigger problem. And so we're going to have to look through that. But I want to play this Millie Weaver's statement. It's a couple minutes into a video where she was exonerated all those charges. She had exposed Shadowgate, I think is the name. This thing I reported on that sure looked like it had a lot of the components, but has another question. I sort of identified those as well, whether or not that was more of a psyop itself. But to me, it's more opportunity. Once these people try to act against you, it's more opportunity to expose them. We just need the people to do so. in the proper way. I mean, in the proper way, without sensationalizing. Go right after go for the jugular on it. Don't make it an opinion part. You do it by fact. You're going to find out we have to move through the fact and truth of it. Not what you think it's the fact and truth. What is the fact and truth? And the reason why you have to do that is very clearly because if we don't, we're going to go to a very serious place. And the way they know you better than yourself, they're going to get you there while you cling to your guns, while you cling to your baseless ideas of freedom. They already got you locked down and you haven't figured that out. Your inability to deal with it, your inability to come through it without going to violence in defense. And that's what they plan on, besides your helplessness and your agreement to be helpless by inaction. Not even acting wrongly in defense of yourself, which would be a viable action. Even though it was wrong, you would still be defending yourself. And so I guess that's my dismay and my trouble with what I see, with what I say, and the small amount of response that comes from it, and the small amount of coverage that comes from it. This is a global problem, folks. I don't know if you get this. And we were supposed to, the United States of America, we were supposed to be the beacon, and nobody there understands how to turn the beacon on. And so it's really fascinating, and I don't even know what the words, I don't really have the adjectives. I just know it's a sense in me that just feels people are in trouble. People are going to be in trouble, and it's because they're wanting to remain ignorant and silent if they have a knowledge. And let me go to Millie Weaver's Exonerated video. Just want to play something here. Someone who didn't have her back, and in my observation, how that could have been multiplied, leveraged into something. When I get back to this, it'll be about a minute or two.
Anyway, I'm going to be announcing today that I'm going to be seeking legal remedy. I feel like I have been wronged. I feel like this has been a horrible miscarriage of justice. The police essentially slandered me in their own police reports, and I am going to be taking action back because this should not happen to anyone. And I know this happened to me, and thank God I had so many wonderful supporters like you guys out there that were able to raise me a legal defense fund so that I could fight back and get good lawyers. But the financial burden that was placed down upon me and my family was designed to destroy me. It was designed to destroy me. No regular person could handle that. I mean, the fact, if I wouldn't have had that legal defense fund, I don't know what I would have done. I was financially ruined over the whole thing. I mean, I lost my job. I got fired. So much for Alex Jones, right? Sticking by people's sides and caring about fighting against injustice, fighting against the globalists, fighting against corrupt government officials. When the minute they come after me, he turns his back on me. I feel really let down. And I hope that many of the people out there that, that took this opportunity to kick me while I was down or run the knife through my back while I was unable to face them, I hope that those people will apologize and at least cover that I've been exonerated and admit that they were wrong. And admit that they...
So I'm going to end it right there. You can listen to this later if you want. I want you to listen to the dynamic that went on. It's not just exposing AJ for someone who wouldn't cover the back of an employee who was a reporter. It was the dynamic. You also hear the power of the people to come to rescue. And it does take money, and that's another problem. You see that the people that are attacking you will attack you because you can't financially. That shows me one of my decisions to, not a decision, it just the direction I took reduces my finances to some place that I better be really capable because I don't have a dollar to defend myself. And so I had to make that choice. And I'm geared up enough, I hope, to be able to make a tussle out of it if I have to, if they come against me. And I've told you how you stay away from it, and so far so good over decades on bringing this other information. But when they kick you, they get you down, and then your so-called friends kick you. Other friends come in to help save, but it's only monetary. You realize that your system is bar association and the banks against you and your property and your family. So understand this dynamic more than AJ at this. AJ's kicking her to the curb, stabbing her in the back at this point. This is the dynamic that's under. These people play for keeps. And thank you for everybody that stood up in this case to help her financially. Now we get to the point about AJ dropping her right at the time she needs some help. I understand now a multi-million-dollar operation that AJ has. He kicks her to the curb. Now, it's been said, as I read in the comments, that Alex Jones didn't like what she had done in Shadowgate because it was said that she was being played by the deep state in that Shadowgate, which I told you looked like there could be a thing there. But that, to my mind, isn't the reason that you kick out a journalist, a reporter, an investigative reporter that's being played. In my mind, if you're an investigative reporter and you're in the position of AJ and you spout like he does, what you do is you use that to gain proximity for the deep state to do a counterintelligence investigation on that against your reporter. You actually would support your reporter to gain closer action and be able to scrutinize what's going on better, if that was the case. If you were a journalist, if you were actually wanting to fight and expose deception, I would have almost brought her a little closer to the point and said, okay, I don't agree with you, but I'm going to let this go because I'm going to let you know something. We're going to investigate this because now we have proximity to a bigger question. And then I would have taken on with my resources that question. At least that's how I would have probably, with his machine, his financial machine, how I would have taken an opportunity. I told you there's an opportunity. Instead of kicking one of my people to the curb. The other problem here is that when he did that, he's almost touting that he knows what he's going to find if he did the counter-investigation. Essentially, he's investigating his own reporter, but it's not because she's wrong. It's because it may be that Mrs. Weaver is young and impressionable. It may be that, but that's not her problem. Really, that's what you expose. And that's what you expose on what preyed on her would be what I would be appreciative to see if someone like AJ was someone I would regard. You understand, I rarely talk about his stuff. And I rarely have anybody who listens to me because they don't want to hear the sensational. They want to hear someone who set up the condition but not resolve it. And that's done like all these other things. So anyway, I don't want to get lost. I was glad to hear that she was exonerated. The justice system in this country is the weapon. It's not even, I can't say it's not nothing. It's something. It's a weapon, and it needs to be put back in place. And all the players that support it, like the cops, need to be put in their place. I hope she goes for the justice that it seems that she deserves. When you hear the story, they had nothing. The DA had to dismiss the charges. They had nothing. They blamed it on a witness who didn't want to come forward. Now, if that isn't the most lamest thing, you have the power of the state, and all you have is you can only rely on a witness that doesn't come forward, not even a victim. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that part. Thank you for all you people that will never hear this. Thank you for supporting her, for getting her extracted from that system. Hopefully she can get some justice. But understand, in this war, you may not have friends when the chips come down. And you may have, in the lowest places that you thought was exalted, they develop themselves to be who they really are. You really have to plan to move through this thing on your own. You really have to learn to discern, to have people around you that are actually with you, that understand with you. It's why I want to make sure everybody around me knows the basis for why we are moving for something. And so, I just want to say I'm sad to even hear that how she was treated. It's partly why I continue to come here. People are being destroyed. If you don't believe what she just said about how they tried to destroy her, she knows. Anybody who's been involved in this knows the system is capable of your destruction. And it takes a lot of keen-minded people to come together, even if you're not keen-minded, just in the principle of it, to help support. But it wasn't done just on any money support. That certainly helps. And so there's a lot that has to come to bear here. This system that's out there, for as much as I can see the good, it's been occupied by a bunch of demons. And you better come to terms with that. And that can't scare you away. Yeah, I don't hear any fear in her right now. In fact, because she was found to be exonerated, she's feeling pretty confident. Sometimes it gets pretty dark. At any rate, really astonished in a way. You hear the truth of who do you want? Does she want AJ in the foxhole now with her? No. Not that I'd ever thought he was anything to be in, but she did. And so here's another thing. I'm not saying what she did in Shadowgate was wrong. I'm telling you what I heard in Shadowgate makes a lot of sense and is likely what it's supposed to be, even if it's a play. Because they want to tell you some things and they want to lead your mind, and you forget that there's other things going on because you work on the sensational. She could have been played just like that, like she thought AJ was somebody. Would I go report for AJ if I was capable, could do it and all that, and if I had a face for television? No. Okay, so there's a different point here. Anyway, I don't want to get too lost on this. I'm happy for Millie Weaver, even if she's been duped by the deep state to run Shadowgate, which would be a surprise to me, actually, that AJ didn't use that as an advantage to come after and investigate those that were duping his investigative reporter, educating her as well. And if we look around and we don't see the evidence of our support for each other, you better be having those people at least at arm's distance. Or understand it's worse. There actually are the players on the scene. So before I stay there going on, we keep moving on. The reason I think some of us are, like she's talking about having her backstabbed and how it doesn't work out, is in the perception some people may not be able to help themselves. Part of that is your nutrition. Part of that is you being potentially changed over time by all this. And this comes out as an older story. We're moving on now, moving into this this transformation they're doing of society. Biodiversity treaty, excuse me, I keep calling it a treaty. It's really not a treaty. It's a convention. It has some force and effect, but it's not the treaty. And so that was what happened in 1994. It was not ratified by the Senate, this biodiversity concept that happened in 1992, where they allowed genetic engineering, genetic sharing of information, what you're suffering under COVID, man-made novel things emerging all the time to create harm in your life. Well, gene-modified organisms are also part of your food system in modernizing your food. To do what? Well, we really don't know totally, but we know there's negative consequences to gene modification, as you might think there would be from something man's meddling with versus nature just doing it on its own without any help. That GE Salmon deemed unlawful by the courts, and it says here the United States District Court for the Northern District of California has ruled that the FDA violated environmental laws in approving genetically engineered GE salmon. This is a major victory, especially considering that given the sham GE food labeling law that again, genetically engineering, not GE, the company, genetic engineered food labeling law that Congress passed, the GE salmon would not be required to have clear labeling that is genetically altered. They call this a clear victory. I think these are people that eat genetic altered food. This is not a clear victory. Listen carefully. This is the Bar Association supporting sustainable development. How? The FDA violated an environmental law, not that the food was bad for the animal human. And so, again, so good deal. They've outed that if the FDA had accounted for, and this is administrative law again, accounted for its environmental harm, it would be okay for you. Understand the priority. You are not the priority. You are an animal to be fed. And you'll be fed with the food you're going to be fed as manipulated by those making the profit to do so. To do what? Well, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like all that stuff does any good. And I also find that people that understand the genetically modified foods and don't stay away from them and understand their body can know that they're having reactions, that when they keep that food, it's like the elimination diet. You eliminate the GM foods, they're back to normal. Is there a proof? Well, no. Not the way the government wants to see it, but each one of us has to make that decision. So if you forego your own innate intelligence and methodologies, and you buy into these foreign ideas, what you see is the courts coming out that other people who must be eating genetically modified organisms that have modified their thoughts, they think this is a major victory. It's a victory of sorts, no doubt. But is it a major victory? When you really look at what they're doing, they've actually promoted that they didn't put the environment first. You animals, you humans, you, the color of man, people. It's okay to feed you about anything. But watch out, don't pollute that environment. And it's not, excuse me, I used the wrong word. It's not pollute. Don't affect the environment. This is the problem. Other problem is why I had to correct myself. Pollution and climate change and whatever all else these nonsensical things they do are now joined, and they're not the same thing. And when I saw this, I wondered, why wasn't the EPA part of this? Because that would have been something inside the administrative system for environment. In any regard, I'm not going here to, I'm not moving through the analysis. You'll read that they talk about crossbreeding. They don't talk about that there was a problem with the fish itself, the genetically modified organisms, which they believe they've shown doesn't do anything. When I talk to people who understand and are sensitive to their body, likely, and a few of them are the ones that have asthma, they know real quick. They know real quickly that their life's on the line when they get affected. And when they do an elimination diet and they analyze their labels and they look at the barcodes, notwithstanding the labeling law, and they track down where the food source and they eliminate everything that even looks close to being genetically modified by artificial means. There's a hybridization you can do as a farmer. You can do that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these gene-modified lab organisms. The consequences of the genetic modification of which we do not know, as science does not know. People don't know. That they don't care that that's what's going on in your food system, your modernized food system. All they care is that there's going to be cross-pollination, if you will. There's going to be cross-breeding of the species. And so, interesting to me. I don't see it as a major victory. I see it as a little bit of a clawback, but it's admitting that the Bar Association agrees that the environment is first, and you have no standing. U.S. to be converted to mass vaccine compliance system with propaganda and entry requirements. It's an ongoing story here. What I told you was going to be happening. It's now reported elsewhere. I'll just keep going on with these. I guess to me it's important you see the players are there. I want you to step up and protect yourself. There's things coming down the pike that even, as I'm trying to tell you to get the habeas understood, get it ready to go, being able to assert it, there's going to be measures that you can't use that, and you still have to have other answers. And until I see people that are interested, we really can't move into what do you do when the habeas won't work? When you look ahead of time, like we're going to see, when they release you from at least the physical imprisonment, your habeas won't work for that because it's done. But if you don't fight the lawless fraud that they're coming by to do that imprisonment, then you're going to be susceptible again. So there's this dynamic. You're not going to be able to use it if they pick you up or you don't want to do a mask and they want to arrest you or whatever the heck it is. It's coming down tighter and tighter in more and more places. Your habeas won't work as soon as they release you. It doesn't mean that you won't be brought through the process and stuff. But anyway, moving to here, the same players are involved in this report. The Center for Health Security at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Bloomberg? That's the first time I've ever seen that they were involved with Johns Hopkins. Interesting how this is all integrated. Has released a coercive blueprint that seeks to claim ownership of humans and vaccinate everyone on the coming years. Now, understand, this is an interpretation which I don't agree. I disagree. I agree with. I do not disagree with that. This is what they're doing, but you won't find this in the plan per se. You have to read into that. Like I was telling you last week, the so-called the Great Reset, big transformation of society. You won't read it. When you read that document, you won't necessarily see that's what they're doing. But as I showed you in a couple spots, you can look at their code words and you can extract that pretty well, really quickly. And then you see, more importantly, the deed. The deed is, in fact, happening, whether or not you want to attribute it to that document. So anybody that wants to say, well, it's not really happening, well, maybe they're just, well, they're probably media and they're lying or they're clueless. And you will have to decide for yourself. Is Libra code correct in the very first notice to you? You know them when you sees them. You know them by their deed, not what they says. Not what they says. Yeah? I catch your attention by all these odd words I try to use to get your attention so you listen. IR intelligent behind the woodshed. Folks, this is what they're preying on in you that you're missing. All this stuff that you think you're so intelligent on, they're so far beyond what you think you understand about yourself. This is really a disaster. I've been watching this train wreck coming. I was hoping the train that they had, the spur that they built right in front of everybody, that they wouldn't have been able to do it, that we wouldn't have to suffer their switching mechanism to transform you off the rail. But we're not, as a society, I haven't seen evidence of that awareness yet. I think they've actually, well, I'm not quite sure if they've actually got us on that spur yet, but they are so close. So GM Salmon is deemed to be lawless, and we move into their converting your mass propaganda vaccine compliance system. Well, that's more GMO on top of it, okay? So, but John Hopkins Bloomberg School is involved for public health. That's government health, remember? Read the code words. Read it both ways. But government health, they don't care about you. This is all about the government. Has released a coercive blueprint that seeks to claim ownership of humans. Humans, those are animals? Did I say they're animals? Can they claim ownership of man? Go look at the statute. There's no authority extended to man, including women. When we talk this way, when I talk behind the way, we really need to pull mankind includes women. It does not include humans, which are treated differently in the statutes as well. Anyway, for those of you that don't know that, you may your nuts go away. You better do some more research. The blueprint is called The Public Role of COVID-19 Vaccination Planning Recommendations Informed by Design. Informed, that's a buzzword for the Sustainable Development Imposition. Informed by design, which means that they were already doing a study out there. They've already had a process that allowed the data to be created for them to be informed by design, thinking, and social behavioral. Behavioral? Oh, it's another common theme in sustainable development. Social, another common theme in sustainable development. And communication sciences, propaganda, period. The document tells us, let me read it, I guess, without interruption. Planning recommendations informed by decision thinking and social, behavioral, and communication sciences. The document calls on U.S. lawmakers, practitioners, academics, and non-traditional partners, such as church leaders, who have been co-opted since the 90s, to unite. That was an interjection. That's not part of the article. To unite as one and to unite as one. Unity, folks. Read this article, even in description of this party who I think would be counter to this. You see the description is exactly what they say. The world we want is what they say is going to be happening, is redefined right here, so I know the author's paying attention. Church leaders to unite as one and provide a strong, consistent message about the necessity of taking COVID vaccinations, about taking a GMO into your system, a private novel product for your consumption, and to whatever damage I can't even tell you. They don't even know. They just tell you it's going to happen. We found that out last week. The UK wants computer systems with AI that will track all the adverse effects they anticipate. So now it's promoting, that we're into promotion mode to get you to be less so-called hesitant. And if you don't have the word fraud in your mouth here already and how to discuss this, as I've been trying to get you to do further, simply pulling a habeas together, because it forms your mind, focuses it on what's going to be coming up. I don't know what to say for y'all. I really don't. One of the top members of this so-called CIA-linked operative named Luciano Borro has been named as a member of Biden's COVID-19 task force. As we mentioned that, I don't know if I'm going to have a story quickly. Has the Electoral College spoken yet, folks? For all the certainty about this guy? And beyond that, has the Constitution spoken on this election? I'm not going to call it selection. There's a process going on. Everybody doesn't quite understand it, so you think it's something else. But at any rate, is the Constitution actually spoken quite yet on whom is going to be filling an office of the President of the United States of America? I don't think so. And so I'm watching. This is very interesting to watch. I don't know that I've ever seen this in my life, or even before looking historically what's going to potentially happen in the United States of America relative to this year's election. 2020 has been a very interesting year nonetheless. All the whatever we're allowing upon us. The guidance, now it's a guidance. Remember all these words. If you look at the way he's describing this here, this is urges. They want to call on policymakers. See, they have no power. You have more power if you would assert it. I guess that's what I read. I don't even know. There's so many things in my mind about why I want to tell you these things that by the time I get here, I really forget all the power, but I see the words as I'm reading through again. Urge means they have no power. All they can do is urge. The guidance calls on the federal government. Guidance. Now, if they're considered a medical expert by your own statutes, if you knew your own health statutes, the administrative side, they have been given power somewhere by the rule, that's administrative promulgation, which can be destroyed for being contrary to the law itself of the state or the legislative intent. The guidance is considered an expert. That's where you have to hit it. And so one of the ways, I mean, this is a combination attack here, a combination response in what you're demanding. Why I don't think people understand what I'm saying when they think that we're invoking something that's really what they perceive to be a problem, a singular action. No, this is all being done at once, within one action. The guidance calls on the federal government to conduct social and behavioral research on COVID-19 vaccination in order to convince more people to vaccinate for the greater good, quote, greater good. Now, yeah, Governor, statutes, we don't need no stinking statutes. Yeah, I think you do. And this is one of my main contentions right now. You absolutely need to talk in an objective basis with these people. It's not really talking. Because the fact is we think we don't need those statutes, and that's really the only thing that we're going to be able to use objectively to stop what they're doing. Otherwise, they diminish you. They don't listen to you. They run off. They have nothing that you're going to challenge them with. So I totally do not agree with that, even though I do like the sentiment. I wish we could say that. I wish they honored people as not being subject to the offices of the creature they created. So I guess there's always this duality here about that myself, and in this condition that I think people sometimes speak to one side or the other. When I'm speaking about doing something like a habeas or having to address that system that was created to help secure to us, not secure us, but secure to us, I'm not dismissing why I'm having to tell you that is, if you don't, you're going to war. You're going to guns. You're going to go to physical, seriously detrimental conditions, and you don't have the mind to move through it when you get it done, is the other problem I see. This is so many steps of fallen nature going on that we have no appreciation as a society that I can see. If it's out there, I am missing it. That's all I can tell you about that. But anyway, the guy, you hear all this, all the words guidance is no authority, but then we hear an authority. The authority is to convince you. Why? Because they need to convince you. They need your consent, the overt consent. They need you to buy in. If you understand how to reword the words, even in discussion of this by an author, through what he's reading or she's reading, I forgot to look and see who's doing this. This is a CIA front. Who do you think subverted the reports back in the 90s? Or who do you think subverted the churches? But the CIA, with their agents, as they went in and did the same old type of propaganda to convince them, the pastors, that they had to go a certain way. And then all of a sudden we saw what John something or rather, that you're supposed to listen to your government master. That's only if it's a lawful government. No one ever understands how to even analyze for that. And very few pastors are actually not corrupted, and I know that. All I need to know is ask them what their tax status is, and I can tell you whether or not the CIA even got to them, whether or not they're corrupted. There's two statuses the church can choose. If they have a path, if there's a path, a fork in the road, and they have a choice, and one is the servitude and one is freedom, and they choose the servitude, I know who I'm dealing with. I don't even have to talk to them more about it. But I don't treat them like they expect to be talking to their people underneath a spiritual sense. They're misguided already. They're fallen already. They are not sensible enough to defend the church against an imposition and servitude to the government. Anyway, getting to here. So much to talk about, folks. So much to expose. So much to see. So much to avoid. So much to choose other paths. And it ends up being the path less followed, Gary L., thank you, because there's not many that are knowledgeable to follow the correct path. Otherwise, that path would be worn. You'd have to be widening it. It'd have to be paved to get everybody through the path that was supposed to be, that is less traveled, that actually should be the path that we all travel. The narrow path. The document offers a glimpse into what life will look like in 2020 as the U.S. infrastructure capacity building here. That's another sustainable development word in this. Whether or not this author knows or not, I'm telling you, when you read this, I read these documents probably 3 or 4 different ways while I'm reading. I got 3 or 4 different columns working as I analyze what's going on in these things. U.S. infrastructure is rapidly converted into a mass vaccine compliance system rife with vaccine propaganda, bodily requirements, and persecution toward those who refuse the vaccines. I'll go one more because it brings up another important word, which you can use and be action if you're going to defend yourself, if you know how, what I've explained to you, how you do it. The guidance, authority here, the guidance is centered on coercion, on convincing the population that they no longer have to be afraid of their immune system and one another as long as they submit to the required vaccines. Now, if they're required, why would they be trying to get your consent? And there's the power that you should have read into this. The power is in your consent. They're trying to convince you away from your better judgment. And so it's up to you to defend yourself. The population is irrelevant to each one of you defending yourself. And if each one of us does that, we have worked as a population to throw off the occupier, which happens to be the military. You're finding out here, if I get down the path, I don't know if I will or not, time is flying. The military has been collecting this data the whole time in order to be able to do this. Now, why are they doing this? I'll just talk about it now if I don't get there. Why is the military looking inward, civilian, if you will, civilly, where they're not supposed to look, to promote to you a vaccine if it's not what I've been telling you all along about you're being treated as an animal who's underneath the veterinary care of the military in a war that's been against you since at least Lincoln's time, that now has turned global. It's fascinating how to see this. At any rate, a lot of you won't understand that. A lot of you will just agree with me, but you won't understand how the dots are created, that they're there, how to establishment, to connect them, and to look and see how that flips around to the future and where we're going. And then what? Looking inside all that to say, well, what do we do? Wow, we're done. They've outmaneuvered everything. And so now what? Now what? What are you going to do? Sit there and whine, mull your hands over, or you're going to defend yourself against what they are working against, which is your consent, and your silence is a consent. Okay? So, it's all about action. What are you going to do about it? I've been offering for decade or two, at least the first beginnings of it, if nothing else. And I think a whole lot more than that. But so coercion. Well, I talked to you about coercion. That's one of your penal felony statute, that an official or someone comes in an official capacity, tries to take you out, move your property, steal your property, come under your rights. Coercion is after the rights of the property. That's a felony. I've explained exactly how to address that. It's right here in this article that it's coming. And if you're only listening 12 minutes, you're not going to get it. You're going to be a victim of this train. It's going to be the train that's called the country, going down tracks that have been now subverted, and there's a switching system put in, and we're going to go. They've got it switched on us. Now, the question is right here. We're right before that switch. Do you consent? It's not just saying I resist. Resist without action is not resistance. And it's not just fighting. I hope people see the deeper problem here. Get out of what you think is going on until you've read a bit. And don't think that someone with writing a book is going to tell you everything or tell you the truth, or will be there when the battle comes and you're in the foxhole, maybe by yourself. The public's role in COVID-19 vaccination planning recommendations informed design is a document. There's a link that you can have to read it yourself. If you go through it, you see who John Hopkins involved, the Center for Health Security. See, that's modernization. This is UN. Just those words. If you haven't figured all this out, I talk too much on this. Well, I should be able to say those things, and you go, oh, that's where that's what's on us. I have to defeat that. And you know right where to go. Texas State Anthropology, you animals. You dead things in the ground, being dug up, is supporting this document. Again, we see Luciano Borio in the members. In-Q-Tel is the organization, for those of you who've done a little bit of research on that. Another, Joseph Buccina, also from In-Q-Tel. All kinds of stuff going on. If you look at the members, who they're involved with, John Hopkins, the same cutthroats that did this plan against you, that helps the modeling, that keeps driving the numbers and the fear. All these people are involved in creating this document, which is just a guidance. And yet, look what they've done on the suggestion to your local officials. And I was going to read about a bit of this, but if you're interested, if you're not, if I read it, you go away. If you are interested, you're going to find this document, because you need to see the words. You need to have it inside you, so you have no doubt this is the way, the path that they've created for you, that they're diverting you from what your life should have been onto what they believe for you is better for you. How they got this authority to think this, I don't know. But this is the power of a health problem. As I told you, coming through the year and into the idea of the flu being expanded into something, they gave a special name. So they gave the flu a special name. You bought the brand of the name. I can't believe it's not butter. That's what you did. And it wasn't butter. It was a big story. And so you bought the flu as COVID-19, or you didn't, but didn't respond to the fraud that they'll now put restrictions on your life, and that allows them to continue. That this report says exactly what they're going to do to advance the vaccines against you that they want to put on you. Even though you'll say, I won't take them, and some of you won't. Remember, they made enough for about 30 million people in the United States of America, and there's about 320 million, 330 million? Some of us are escaping. Dead or alive, I haven't figured out yet, but anyway, keep up being silent. You can't even make a simple little letter of communication to start the process is really fascinating to me. And if you're doing it, not telling me, thank you for not telling me. I mean, I'd like to know you're there, but anyway, tell me what you're doing, see what your problems are. This is the other problem. The dynamic is that we're so behind the times of implementing what we need to do. We don't know what the responses are yet on how we have to continue to move through their obstructions. Okay, so John Hopkins is a primary player in all this. Anybody who's been searching this and wants to get out of it can know this. I'll tell you something, though. Their influence ends at the rule that says they're a medical expert, and you challenge that for a fraud and the fact that it doesn't implement the legislative will. Because why? Because when you look at the statute for you, in your locale, your doctor takes care of you when you become a patient subject to what might look like a communicable disease. They would write a report, the report of which goes to the public health official, who now investigates whether or not it's a communicable disease. And we saw in the Portuguese case, that doesn't mean that they take jurisdiction over you, the patient. And their authority is limited to that patient, as at least one of you knows. You sent me that neat response that explained this, exactly consistent with the Portuguese case, which I think we might get to quickly here with RT. Now it's being reported, what I've been telling you about. And they make a disclosure to you, which I want to prove out what I've been telling you is the proper way to go at this point. But at any rate, they explain it, you understand, they talk about the novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. It's a fraud right in the executive summary. They haven't identified that. They're interested in social behavior, communication science. They're interested in social behavior to be adjusted and controlled through propaganda. And so you can read what they're saying. Again, you can read that it's a plan. They'll deny that it is, but watch what comes out. And I'm telling you, when you see that it's coercive, when you see that it's extortion, when you see that there's no basis, it's based in fraud, when you see that it's a breach of trust as well, because if it's a guidance and not local to what you have established as the posterity, these are powerful positions to lay out that I think once more people are using these statements, it will help empower people to be strong again and not capitulate and not be a nice guy. Yeah, I want to be the nice guy. Okay, I'll wear the mask. In a way, I have no problem with that, but you do that now and we're seriously deficit in how we can respond. Seriously in a disadvantage, and I really dislike disadvantage. In fact, last week was a week of working through a disadvantage that popped up, and I dislike doing that. I'd rather run into a condition, into a fight, prepared and mobile and still have my balance and not have to. I don't mind stepping back to do another attack. I don't care about stepping back. That may be part of that plan of action. But to have to step back when you got slapped back, that's not so cool. And you don't want to get your. That's why I keep telling you folks, just stay on a narrower, closer path. Start understanding some more basics that we as a society were not told was more important to us than what they did tell us. Coronavirus pandemic, Great Reset theory, and a false vaccine claim debunked by the BBC reality check. I only include this, and I cut out a whole lot of other things, and I'm not going to do the analysis. You folks have to start doing the analysis. There's just not enough time for me to continue repeating and repeating how you do the analysis. Today I'll give you a little bit. Read the code words. This is one of the players, the BBC is one of the players in moving the reset forward, in removing your hesitancy. This article came out immediately after the so-called Great Reset theory. It's not a theory, folks. It's actually a statement, which the problem is they understand how to make it phrase plausibly denied as a plan because of the way they phrase the book. Yet inside the plan, they're telling you everything they're coming at you with, as I exposed last week. So BBC tries to do this problem, and one of the things I noticed is I wanted to make mention of is they say that it doesn't. They were talking in one of the points relative to that video we talked about, saying that it doesn't include the fetal tissue. Well, okay, that's a trick answer, because on the label it said MRC5, which I'm going to include another link back. You can go look at that. And I'm going to tell you something. Last week I've been watching this in my browsers, and I have to be careful because I get on so late right before the broadcast when I'm loading everything up that I sometimes can't check. But last week, if you go back and listen to where I'm talking about I'm reading from the MRC, you'll hear me say a phrase that I read right off of the page. It talked about him being the DNA supplier, happened to be a friend of called Morris or something like that. I was reading that right off. I'm reading that. I go, wait a minute, that's not what it said before. I thought I was kind of going nuts, folks. And I'd made the mistake of refreshing that page. I should have taken a screen capture, because I actually went to another browser. I loaded it up. I saw it. It wasn't what I was reading. I was looking between my two monitors, looking at one said MRC5, same link that it was talking. One said this fetal tissue contributor was Morris's friend or something. You'll hear me say it. I read it. And then you'll hear me cut off because that was, and I did a paraphrase of what I had known I read before. I had told you before, last week as well, for going off on a little bit of a tangent. I was reading along, starting about from some country. I started into the text talking about Australia. I go, wait a minute. They're always starting these stories in the wrong country. I don't know how it's happening. My browsers are loading odd. And when I go to refresh them, they change. And so I may sound crazy here, but it's interesting. That's why I said I should have got the screen capture. Today I go and I can read this clearly. BBC says that there was no fetal cell lines in the vaccine. Well, that's the way it's supposed to happen if you have 100% filtration, but they can't. And so they'll tell you they don't have it. They don't test for it that way, but it's there in particle and pieces. And this whole thing is a RNA DNA hybrid condition that they put in your body. I'll read it again. The cell line for the MRC ingredient is a diploid cell culture line composed of fibroblasts originally developed from the lung tissue of a 14-week-old aborted Caucasian male fetus. You might actually hear me say 14-year-old last week. That was a misstatement. But I was reading about the friend. At any rate, trying to recall. Okay, so 14-week-old aborted Caucasian male fetus. They claim that's not an ingredient. That's absolutely an ingredient. What they're going on is that it's not supposed to be in the final product, that if you go listen to Clint Richardson's lethal injection, they can't filter it out. And so there's these spin on words. You really have to start paying attention. I don't like it. I don't like keeping so much detail. I want to live with all this oppression, but until you realize that, and they come against you with this, you're not going to be able to explain that what the coercion is and how, what the extortion is and how, what the lack of warrant they have is by the fraud, how the fraud is made, how you can, and get into being able to succinctly state it instead of going on and on. I tend to talk a lot here, but my focus normally when I'm writing is to make everything as short a statement that comprises the totality of the concept. Shorten it down as much as possible without losing all the details. In fact, this becomes a thing about writing legal briefs. If you were to explain the entire condition, it would make your briefs monstrous, and there's got to be a balance somehow that we're always there's a contention about that. You'll have to meet that. But this is how the media works, to work in these little semantics, if you will, of how the real thing is supposed to be versus what they promote. And they're allowed to promote that is the other problem. That this is how the media speaks, through the allowance that's allowed to the manufacturer. It's okay to have, I told you, it's like the Clean Water Act. Government, nothing's perfect, and that's the whole point. Nothing is perfect. The Clean Water Act is the ability, the license that act gives a polluter to be able to pollute so much. The excess of which becomes actionable, and even then not if they agree, they immediately admit, there's a statutory time for admission, that they did so, which is then swept away so the government can go look and see the potential that happened, because they know that it's going to clear out the system typically. Well, your body may not do that on this. And so this is what the media talks through. When you understand that, to me, you don't need to, I don't get into I just work with the condition. I don't try to argue about it. I just realize who and what I'm dealing with, and I just go look at the point of the failure that is the cause of the harm or the potential that's coming against me. So again, it's a more refined view, and it's an efficacy point. You have to know how to do that quickly, because they're not going to listen to your words very much, and certainly not a cop with a badge who wants to beat you down and choke you out. They don't care there. Okay. Thank you, Moose Girl, for the update. Yeah, I don't update my browsers either, which is another problem. But I'm telling you, all I had to do was reload, and the correct text came up. So I don't update my browsers. I know they'll say it's a security risk, but I find that it's a bigger security risk to allow all the new functions that I don't need into my system. But anyway, that's a methodology I use. May not be smart. There may be arguments against security. However, so far, unless there's something in my machine already doing that to me, the methodologies I've used for security so far have been okay, I suppose. Moving on, COVID-19 Oxford University vaccine is highly effective. In this promotion to get you to buy in, now all of a sudden the chimp adenovirus, this Oxford virus, remember last week, chimp jab 19, is now highly effective. And how they did it was very interesting. And what they exposed to us here is the only thing I really wanted to expose on this. What they exposed, well, besides the lie and the deception that all of a sudden over 1 week everything's fine, was that when you read through the story and you read what it is, they don't know what they're doing. This is, to me, evidence that you don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what they're doing, and that doesn't form the basis of knowing. That doesn't form the basis of disclosure. That doesn't form the basis for authority, or whether or not the rule tells that they're an expert. It turns them into that slow drip under high pressure thing. And so you go through this discussion, you can see they're trying, again, to remove your hesitancy. I call it arresting fraud, not hesitancy. And arresting fraud to make profit. Now we're getting into potentially RICO, which I'm not going to go a sideline to, which if you know that list of authorities, you can go ahead and list those right on out as the elements. So we go down to how does it work. I'll read a little bit here. It uses a completely different approach to vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna, which inject part of the virus's genetic code into patients. The Oxford vaccine is genetically modified common cold virus that used to infect chimpanzees. Now, you have to believe there's an actual virus, which has never been found and isolated. It's only thereby implied presumption, remember, that Moderna and Pfizer are doing anything with genetic code. Even so, they've made something up, didn't they? We know that. We know also it's not much different than Pfizer and the Moderna in the fact that the Oxford vaccine is also genetically modified. Has its own consequences that they don't know. But it's only a common cold virus, which to no one has ever told me that you could cure the common cold. If it's a common cold virus, then it's not novel. This, by definition, does not stop the novel virus. Stop the novel virus. The only reason why it should exist is to stop the novel virus. And you don't hear that it stops. You hear that it reduces symptoms. There's a fraud right there in that sentence over the applicability that it comes as some kind of now effectiveness. They don't tell you what. But right there, we realize it's not effective against what they claim the implied presumption called SARS-CoV-2 even is. And now that you've been researching, if you have, you're hearing that SARS-CoV-2 and SARS-CoV-1 may be in our systems if it existed at all. This is the same stuff as pigs fly flu and all the even 1976 swine flu. It's all fraud and hoax. All right, it's all the same nonsense. It keeps coming back. That it's still a genetically modified common cold that is not novel, and therefore it isn't made to do what it's supposed to do, and it's a fraud on its face just to say that it's effective for anything relative to what was supposed to be a novel thing that was claimed to be a pandemic. That one sentence right there, the Oxford vaccine is genetically modified common cold virus that used to infect chimpanzees. Is you being treated as a human, not a man or a woman, you being treated without your consent as to that it never affected you, or that you might already be resistant, or that your system, not a chimpanzee system, would respond to it. And that the GMO, the genetically modified part, has unintended consequences that they have no clue about. Cannot in one phrase show you that this is something that is effective, but to cause trouble. And you know that because fraud is always fraud, no matter how you package or how completely you put lipstick on the pig. They're going to say it has been altered to stop it causing an infection in people and to carry blueprints for part of the coronavirus known as the spike protein. Well, that's the invented part, number one. Number two is it carries the blueprint. See, that's a code word. That's fraud right there. It's a non-disclosure that it's genetic material. The same thing they say they're avoiding, see, to get your hesitancy down from the Moderna or Pfizer stuff. Write those 3 sentences in a row is fraud right up in front of everybody's face. It's a coronavirus with a spike. What's that? It's modeled. It's not real. Not ever been shown to real, not been found to be real, not been found to be effective if it is real. There's a whole lot of things missing right here. And so I want to stop. We can go on and on to analyze it. I want you to understand you need to read for this stuff. They changed the word genetic code to the word blueprint. And this is how they're taking you down. I've told you, terms are killer here. Literally now, they're going to be killer. You don't get this, and you don't respond to shut it down. Your silence is only going to bring it on, and then at minimum, you're going to be finding out you're going to be affected, as I told you. If you're the 20 million that survived and don't get it, your world is going to be put on its head. It already is, and you're not responding, not even for yourself. Oxford COVID vaccine hits 90% success rate thanks to dosing error. Another, oops, we didn't know. And then you get down in this story, and I won't even read more. They don't know how and why this is happening. It's not something I would place my confidence in. I don't know about you. But this is the news they're telling you to remove your hesitancy, and I want you to understand you change that word hesitancy to be that you are not hesitant. You are there to arrest a fraud. And that if you have a better position, fraud, if you go just look at basic research on study on fraud, you realize that it vitiates everything, and the obligation immediately turns upon the other one to produce how it's not. Otherwise, they admit. It's pretty quick. All right, so this is not a joke. In fact, as all this stuff goes through my mind, one of the ways around the obstruction that was placed this week that I had to work on was making sure that fraud that was alleged in a petition was advanced right up front, as against a principle that needs to be checked out, needs to be investigated by a court. That if they don't, now you can prove the court was not just. And so this is important to understand these basic functions as we move it through. And we see these deceivers. I've told you this before. Discern the deception and the deceit and understand how it's pulled off. A lot of it we communicate in words. That's what you're going to be focused on to make sure you keep straight. A lot of people, I guess, don't have the capacity to do so. I don't know why. It's not that hard, actually. Once you finally work a little bit, study a little bit, get the basic foundation in you, it's really easy to figure out, especially when you have someone like myself that will come really and talk about anything that's very important to you, that if you have a question on it, or by email. And so there's no excuse, actually, regarding people that listen to me. We can move it through. You're finding out, those of you that are, it takes a little bit more than what you thought. And that's because they've done it that way so that it makes it very difficult. It weeds, it's separating the wheat from the chaff against you all. And so my mind, as we move on, I'm getting very wondering, who people really are with all their discussion and complaint. The wheat and the chaff are being separated, and I can tell you there's very few grains in the basket of the wheat at this point societally. Florida fake, false coronavirus positives, just another reason to distrust numbers as the hesitancy crowd, the promotion and the military works to get you to convince yourself we have more proof that the coronavirus positives are just another reason to distrust the numbers coming from the Washington Times. Interesting who's writing this, but anyway, they're now bringing out that maybe we have a problem. Coronavirus positives. Now here's the problem with this one. They're focusing you on now the positives. They don't focus you on the crime, the fraud that even brings that. Not the PCR that's invalid. That's what they're trying to show you on, which I've been telling you is the way you defeat the local authority from being able to find. But they're trying to now we're going to have coronavirus is a sneaky devil. So sneaky, in fact, that it can infiltrate test kits of individuals who've not even submitted to being tested, and then alert authorities to add these new positives as they then deemed the COVID-19 case counts, which is also two more frauds. First of all, it isn't a test at all, and the case counts are fraud if you go to the simple rules and see what a case is. It started by a report from a doctor. Go demand that evidence of that report. They may come back and say, we can't give it to you for personal information. And so in your letter, because we now know this, put in, you'll accept a redacted first report. In other words, the personal information for somebody in their medical care cannot be divulged to you. Granted, we don't ask for that. We do want that report. What does that report do? If you look at the Portugal case, it says that identifies a patient that may have been on a communicable list that the doctor thinks is that he's looking for help to decide how to treat that patient. Not that he hands the patient's authority over to the government. A sneaky devil. Well, it was a fraud. They can sneaky as heck. They can call it all kinds of stuff. It's not. You didn't notice here the coronavirus is a sneaky devil. Well, it's common. It sneaks around and gets everybody. No one's been able to figure out how to stop it, but it's not novel, is it? And so you see them right here. There's a fraud right up in the beginning. Right up in the beginning. Coronavirus and COVID-19 are not the same thing either. So they go on to question for you that now it's becoming proof that there's a lot of coronavirus fake positives. Well, I showed you, their machines are made to make positives. In fact, if they go high enough, everything's a positive. And as we move along here, we're going to find out it's 95% error. And I say that's a 5% error because it should have been 100%. There is no test. And we'll move along. Acute renal impairment in coronavirus-associated severe acute respiratory syndrome. So here's for you folks that have renal impairment, listen to this. This flu that comes through will attack you there if you're weak. And it kicks on a respiratory syndrome. To me, this is just a warning of who the real people that are susceptible to this are, and I have no problem with understanding that for you all. Here, those with renal problems, understand or have problems in your kidneys, be understanding that this thing apparently makes those conditions way worse, sufficient to kill you. Not the whole of society. And when you go in, you got to make sure they don't say COVID, that they look right at that your kidneys are a problem, maybe because it's been exacerbated by the flu this time, this version that started back, well, this is actually the new version, isn't it? The adapted one since last year, right? We're back in the new flu season now. But they're all stuffing underneath SARS-CoV, SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-1, whatever. And so that's all I want to do about this. Understand we have a study here. This was done in 2005, folks, if you thought that some of this stuff wasn't known by the health officials. All those hospitals that have been putting everybody on ventilators because of COVID may have been killing people, not just because of the ventilator misuse, because they weren't addressing the real problem, which I told you early in the year was going to be your problem if you have a health problem. Your actual problem will not be diagnosed, and you will be denied to have your actual problem dealt with. Is this story right here. All right, moving on more. Landmark legal ruling finds that COVID tests are not fit for the purpose. So what do the MSM do? They ignore it. And this is from RT. This is talking about the Portuguese decision, which now they come a week later, behind the woodshed. We may be out in the middle of nowhere and behind the woodshed, but we got some pretty far reach for having no resources, don't we? Talking about things a week ahead of time. Finally hits the what I call mainstream news, even though it's a little bit sidelined, RT. But this is what I found fascinating on this story. I didn't know this because I didn't read it in the other proofs that you'll find in the blogcast or the links that talked about this. But it says, I'll start it out here. You understand the condition and the players, if you will, the people that were involved, the nations from the people and where they went and what they did. Kind of interesting because if you look at the United States of America being the beacon of justice and whatever the heck, you'll see none of this truth came out from that beacon. No one knows where the switch is, supposedly. Let me read this. 4 German holiday makers who were illegally quarantined in Portugal after one was judged to be positive for COVID-19 have won their case in a verdict that condemns the widely used PCR test as being up to 97% unreliable. We're going to get an adjustment to that and a confirmance of that in a moment by a doctor. Finally looking at the numbers. Earlier this month, Portuguese judges upheld a decision from the lower court that found that forced quarantine of 4 holidaymakers to be unlawful. The case centered on the reliability or lack thereof of the COVID-19 PCR test. The verdict, delivered on November 11th, followed an appeal against a writ of habeas corpus filed by 4 Germans against the Azores Regional Health Authority. I'm going to stop right there because that's the whole point. German people went to Portugal and they used the habeas corpus to extract themselves. It's what I've been telling you in America, supposed to be the offshoot from the Magna Carta, who are supposed to have this in your breast, in your soul, that you are to be released from an unwarranted restraint on your liberty. Germans in a Portuguese court use the same remedy to extract themselves, as I told you need to do. This is now being reported a week after I reported those reports I got last week. And I didn't know that they used the writ of habeas corpus. If you would please understand, when foreigners can use the remedies that were supposed to be at the heart of the construction of the establishment of the United States of America better and faster than you all have a problem. And so, I want to focus on that a little bit, writ of habeas corpus. I focused on it. There's a lot of things you can try and do, not just try, but to do. But it seemed to me, because it seems that I see a lot of people that really don't understand the system, the law, the jurisdiction of the Justice Department branch of the government, and how to go through the courts, and the unfamiliarity. And I'm not saying that's not there; that's all there. But that's not an excuse to defend yourself. I felt that the habeas corpus, well, it was the right remedy, but more importantly, it was the most simple remedy because it automatically flips the burden onto the side to cause the warrant to be corrected. All you have to do is present your position on what you believe that restraint is, so that you can anticipate that the answers that will come back fraudulent, you anticipate those. You don't have to talk a whole lot on that. But here it was, I just point this out. German people, utilizing the writ of habeas corpus in Portugal, used it as the tool to extract themselves from an lawful restraint. In Portugal, not the United States of America, not England, not Australia, not Kazakhstan. Folks in those places, listen, would you please? At least try it. Start it out. Do you think I think you're all going to be victorious? Actually, I don't. But the point is if you got involved with me, we could work through what I think the skullduggery that's inside the judicial system is, and we would temper that, if not kill it out, take it out, and make it a problem for them. The problem is you don't have the burden. That's what makes it easier for everybody. But here it was. I was really happy to see, not because I said so, there is a tool. It's so foreign to the Americans, but the Germans figured it out, and the Portuguese understand that that's what's supposed to happen on the very thing I've been telling you. All right, so that you don't have to wait. This is not the PCR now for me is kind of fallen down. It's very important that it's the fraud. It's the thing they bring, but it's not more important than the use of that as a fraudulent cover for their lawless breach of trust. And their statutory breach that they never followed. That the PCR disproves their reliance to be fraudulent as well. This court thing, and the appeal is kind of interesting because it went to appeal to decide it. It doesn't mean that it's not going to go to a higher court and get destroyed. We'll have to stick around to see that. And I can also tell you the reports back, as I will give you here another couple links, that the judges or the judge that decided this is determined to be, because he said all this, he's determined to be a rogue judge, that's the Great Reset people coming in to try and put doubt upon the character of a judge, which is the double-edged sword here. How do you agree that the judge is right when you're saying that they're corrupt? This one happened to be not corrupt. That doesn't seem to be the totality of the thing that the private enterprise, the Bar Association, infiltrated into your governments as an agency of the state. That thing that happened in Portugal is not what you see around the world. It's not typical in that justice system. It's why I talk to you the way I do on how we have to combat this a certain way. Anyway, habeas corpus, here's an example. Germans in Portugal using it to extricate yourself. I don't see how this is not an answer in all those places that you want to patriotically talk about the Magna Carta and how much liberty you got underneath that extortive document. But it's there, isn't it? The writ of habeas corpus is in the establishment, and yet it's not suspended. I guess I should talk a little bit about that. Maybe I'll wait. It's not suspended, as one commenter said. As I found out, when I tried my first 3 for a friend, I had written it up wrong. Yes, you have to write it right. I written up wrong. When I wrote it up right, they did the next dastardly thing, threw him out of the jail, stuck him on the street at 2 in the morning. But they didn't keep him. And anyway, so habeas corpus, kind of cool, kind of neat, just to watch it, just to see it right here, just to see there's a tool that can work, even if you're a German in Portugal. Rule of law and democracy. What can I say? So it's I guess up to us, isn't it? Isn't it really up to us? I told you, the writ of habeas corpus is not the populace. It's not your friends. It's not everybody else. It's not the system and all the people. It's you. No, not the other guy, you. It's not me. It's you. Each one of you, I told you, this is the power. I read it in the other article. This is the power that they are waiting for you to hand over to them. Consent. Don't defend yourself. Don't call it an unwarranted restraint of your liberty, and they just accept that it isn't. And I guess I will talk now about the comment, and I thank you about the comments. I really do appreciate the comments, but this is where it's a double-edged sword for me as well. Johnny Sandtrap, thank you over at Normalization of Ignorance for posting this, and thank you, Normalization of Ignorance, for posting the broadcast. And thank you for your sentiment on what I'm trying to provide here and your agreement to that. What I want to address, though, is this first comment that talks about the operative words. You said the suspension of writ of habeas corpus, and then it goes on to say Mr. Anthony, it is my assertion that the clash and bloody chaos is inevitable, and there is only really a question about how to mitigate the violence so as to come out on the other side with somewhat together, in my humble opinion. And what I say together, when I say together, I mean with some semblance of direction, moving forward positively and focused on real freedom, 100% absent of tyrannical rule, the, quote, powers, unquote, of some form of organized yet limited government needing to be firmly in place. There's more to read from that on normalization of ignorance, and I'm going to stop here. I want to address the point. Yes, we are probably not too far away about our sentiment about that. I just said that earlier. What I'm trying to do is get us to move through without going to the violence. Would I have to take contention the bloody clash and chaos is inevitable is our will to allow it. I'm not so. I see that. I see that there's somewhat. It's like, I don't want to use the inevitability. It is certainly a very high probability given the direction we're going. Is it an inevitability? Then let's go back up to the beginning. Is the writ of habeas corpus suspended? Well, in Portugal it's not. I guess I can say it that much. I also know it's not in the States. But I also know that from my own experience, I did my first couple wrong until a real lawyer, a good guy, who himself could not cotton the Bar Association and their corruption in that system, had to leave it. He sat down with me at 4 a.m, asked me to his office to explain to me, because we had a mutual friend in jail who was being wrongly treated, how I was going to write that habeas. We wrote it. It's not that it's suspended. So if you write down, for anybody who's not just the commenter, you write things like, quote, an operative word is, quote, the suspension of writ of habeas corpus, you've just eliminated your credibility, first of all, and your misinterpretation and your imposition of inevitability, and you've taken away from yourself at this point, understand, a still viable remedy. And I don't want to, I keep thinking optimism. Understand, all I know is we have to defend ourselves against this overriding oppression and occupation. That's up to us to figure out and stop. There is this potential that appears inevitable that we're going to bloodshed. I'm here to tell you, as long as we get together before, we are going to move through. We can use this to educate ourselves to be able to move through and check all this. Now that we see when it all boiled up to the surface, we now get to skim the surface clear of all that was inside the things that we didn't need in the soup of society. And so I would take issue. It's not inevitable. If you're saying inevitable, maybe because you've foreclosed the fact that you think the writ of habeas corpus or any other remedy is suspended. They aren't yet suspended. And they likely will not suspend them. It starts to hit more of the nerves of the so-called patriots out there. And at any rate, thank you for the comment. I don't have time and ability to interact. We probably aren't so much different. I am maybe more of the mind to, instead of looking at what might look to be inevitable, to say, how do we avoid it? And I come to you every week to try and explain how we start to set ourselves back into that course. We bring it back, each individually. We don't let them deal with us as a populace of human, the color of man, treated as animals. And so thank you for the comment. Thank you, again, Normalization of Ignorance, for being a great supporter to keep posting these things. I understand Normalization. If I read the comments and understand it right, he's been slapped for doing postings. I don't know if it was from this broadcast or others, but this is the YouTube-type censorship going on. But I move on here now. Thank you for the comment. I hope you understand. I understand the direness. I tell you, we're living in a military consequence. We have, as a society, since Lincoln. We're in a war. And so the point for me is, we've already lost the bloody war, and yet I see ways that we can get through this without any more bloodshed, that if we understood that, we get through. We do pass through the valley of the shadow of death, and we do come to a better place at the other side with a much greater awareness and a much greater integrity of our people and society. That's just a conceptual thing for me. I don't even know if we're really capable, but we're supposed to be. I still marvel a bit. The people who established the United States of America with that Constitution, look at this election cycle. Look at all the checks and balances that are built in when that Constitution speaks. When it all starts to go, the wheels start to fall off or look like they are. Look at what starts to kick in that these people wrote back when they started the place, that people are generally clueless to. Their acts before us that they handed us to keep. It's really kind of a phenomenal thing to watch, for as imperfect as it was. Remember, they said they wanted to make a more perfect union, and then they stuck us under military control. Oh, well, maybe that wasn't quite the control we should have needed, and we need to throw that back off. Although I don't think we're going to throw it off. We lost the Second Amendment war. We're going to have to figure out a way. My thought that we're going to have to figure out a different way. If we foreclose the habeas at this point, we've done ourselves a disservice. We just found out that that's the case. Germans just used it in Portugal. Why aren't you in the United States of America or any other crown corporation holding, utilizing that tool and keep pounding them with the same tool? If you don't get it the first time, until they come back and say you can't answer or respond the same thing with prejudice, you get to fix whatever problems you find. In fact, if you understand what you're doing, you can have those fixed before you get decisions. And so, again, there's a whole dynamic of battle. It's a civil war in paper. Much better than bullets. And so waiting for the inevitable is going to bring that on. It's the thing you fear, or you're going to be ineffective and inactive to stop something that comes that brings it short of everybody getting active to try that. That's really the bigger thing I see. They're not going to let you go to the Second Amendment. You won't have the impetus to, and you're going to be out positioned because you're not able to figure out how they did it, how to establish it. Virginia was the closest thing we got to be able to put that against, lawfully, as a threat against the government of Virginia when they went to the sanctuary city thing. I told you how to I told everyone how to deal with that. Virginia failed it. The people failed themselves. 95% concurrence of the people were able to point out maladministration right to the Constitution and did not effectuate that remedy in the Virginia Constitution. Just like if you say the habeas has been suspended, you won't affect that remedy. Yet you see evidence that Constitution works in the election cycle right now. How everyone's scheming and planning that Trump's just going to sit there and watch this thing go out because the dynamic of the checks and balances of the people that established this place figured out that when we have turmoil like this, there's going to be a way to check it. And they did it 4 steps deep at least. It's just fascinating to me to start seeing this. I've never seen this in my life. Never even researched about it. And so, pretty exciting in a way, but it's not going to happen because we're disinterested or we're going to let someone else do it, especially when the jab comes in your arm. The mask, the person they hang from your face. Remember, the word person means false face, mask. I said that last week at the very end of the broadcast if you weren't there to hear it. You can read this too. It's right there. It's not something I read and I educate myself. It's reminded to me something I've been doing since, understood and helped people with since the 90s. Now, moving on here, the next tweet. What came out from all this was reminded to us again by Yardley Yeadon. I want to give him credit because it's the Twitter, in which I'll just tell you folks, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be active at all on Twitter. It's almost unusable to me. There's really not much response. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to integrate all that. And so, but there's information that comes through that I can't find anywhere else. Otherwise I'd really be going to other places. But we'll see about how long I've been cutting my activity time down there just to post to let people know there's not many people that come through. And then to try and read the Twitter for me has become just a battle. I don't know if some of you folks understand. I started to go to battle to what Twitter puts in my feed, and I started cutting it out and blocking it. And it destabilizes the whole entire feed. And what Twitter pulls out to try and interject what it wants, watching that battle between my blockers and what Twitter wants is fascinating. Some of you folks, some of your posts don't want to be placed up front. They're actually removed, and my feed goes shooting up, and your stuff is replaced. And it's a couple of you have an awful lot of posting that does, and others are untouched. And the more innocuous things, like talking about kitties and pictures and kids, those stay. But anybody talking anything controversial disappears, while Twitter's trying to throw junk into my ads and things into my feed. Anyway, it's making it unusable. It's not really ever been a tool for me. After all these years, I only have a couple hundred people visiting. Not many people respond to me. Not many people respond through what we do. And I've got maybe other things to do. So I just want to let you know, I don't know yet. I haven't decided on Twitter. But right now, we have some information from Twitter. Very important. The only place I could find it. Doubtless, this is a Lockdown Skeptics, a link, I think, from last week. But this starts the process of other people coming in to discuss this, which is empowering for people for knowledge. And to start to see how this works out. 97% of the Portuguese court found 97% error. When we get done here today, right through this little section of Twitter tweets, you're going to find it's by a doctor doing the analysis. It's at least 95 by numbers directly. Doubtless the most important legal judgment in 2020. Please read. Court found abuse of process in illegal detentions and penned a devastating critique on the use of PCR as medical diagnostics. The doctor says Portugal may be small, but it's an EU member. Again, started by an habeas corpus. Remember, going to the next link, that's where I got that. Now we move over to someone who's responding to all this. Italy confirmed by Italian health service false positives to COVID-19 tests as diagnosis are 95%. The legal cases started against testing under charges of fraud to procure public funding, which is something I was hoping someone would come up right now. I was thinking about maybe even doing it myself. This is a big deal right there. Procurement of public funding underneath this fraud, false alarm, ideologically false, and manslaughter. Powerful statement. A doctor, you'll see the link. I'll give you the thread. I won't go through it. It's just a fascinating read. And I don't, maybe Ranchero42 headed me onto this. Thank you for that, if I remember correctly there as I'm reading through this now, or looking at it. The thread explains that the condition, there was 4 PCR elements to test for. In the beginning in April, they tested 3. They're now down to 1. If that one goes positive, you're deemed to be positive. He's explaining how this works through and how, as a doctor, he's now identified and shows you the copies of the paperwork if you can speak Italian. And part of it's not so hard to read if you look carefully at the roots of the words. You can kind of see what they're saying in it. Some of the words you may have to go translate. But he's explaining how the officials, in their forms, allowed the testers to move the case, to move the test. It's not a test. I don't know why. Move the technique to bring the whole thing to be 95% positive and error. He's got the thread. You can read all about it. It's really fascinating. Another guy that he links to called Bobby, let me see, this is Robin Minotti Graziadia Dei, and he links over to Bobby Rajesh Malhotra, who then has been doing an extensive thread, 124 as I see here, tweets. Now, because a tweet can only be 280 characters. I don't know that I even get that much anymore. I had to reduce the size of a post this morning, 4 or 5 more characters because they keep crunching down my space. But at any rate, he says Christian Drosten's inner circle are without no doubt Olfert Lant, Adrius Nietzsche, Marion Koopmans, Victor Corman, Ian M. Mackay, John F. Mackay, they're both Mackay, Tedros, and more. Main sponsors are RKI, WHO, and WEF. This guy has made a thread of all the players inside these organizations, this conspiracy of people together promoting this thing. It's some of you, I just should have the interest to watch. If you like organizational conspiracies exposed, this guy looks like he's really exposed a ton. That if you were to pull it together, boy, I wish somebody do a mind map for this one. The connections are just very considerate. You're looking at a crime against mankind, and this guy looks like he is on the study of it that Robin Minotti Graziadia Dei, is referring to in his work, showing the doctor explaining the fraud. And so now we have people finally come. It took, 11 months now for people to finally be on the investigation. Someplace Alex Jones should have been doing this stuff. To come up and figure out how the fraud's playing out and who the people are. Because there's another guy, maybe Fulmich in Germany, the attorney Fulmich, may be on the cusp of bringing a world suit about this. Why? Because it's in the EU, and they can do that apparently over there. Oh no, Americans don't use the writ habeas corpus. No, you require the Germans to figure it all out for us, I suppose. Again, the beacon. No one knows where the switch is. Lawmakers file petition to the state Supreme Court over governor's actions during pandemic. People are starting to push back. It's very cool. I'm glad to see it. However, interesting that lawmakers have to go to the judicial branch to stop the executive branch over what? I don't know. They don't name it as fraud. This is the other problem. 5 state lawmakers are asking the Supreme Court to rule whether Governor Jim Justice, is this West Virginia? Jim Justice, and he's doing a play on words in this, is pretty interesting, because you're going to be obstructing justice if you don't follow his mandates. Well, there is no obstructing justice in this state. There's obstructing an officer. So he's playing on his name, which shows he's deceptive. And he has no authority, they find out. And in this case, where the 5 lawmakers are suing, the state's attorney general steps up and says, yeah, the governor has no power here. We agree with the governor. He has no power to enforce a thing. What do you want to know about? You want to know that these things that are coming down through the executive branch over a public health authority have no power, notwithstanding what they'll tell you. And you don't want to go up against a goon with a badge while he believes the governor in your state is doing the law. When that order he's following, he's too stupid to figure out and too unpatriotic, if you will, to do his due diligence as to whether there's a lawful law there, a lawful order, or the extent. See, remember, Portuguese tells us if you go read your own statutes, the statutes do not say that the public health authority takes authority over the patient. The doctor has the exclusive jurisdiction over care. What the state does is try to stop a potential communicable disease from spreading everywhere else. Totally different authorities. Totally different powers. Therefore, all they have is authority over sick patients, not over the entire society. And once you see this and you read it and you see exactly what the Portuguese statement is, telling us how we should read our statutes. I have to thank these folks, because it's not coming out of the United States. It's not coming out of the judges of the United States of America. It's not coming out of the Bar Association. Not even the ones that sue. None of this has come out. I get kind of excited in a way, folks. You have your power right here, and these people need you to relinquish your power. And the way you execute that against them is to not be silent. It's to physically get writing down and make a record. It doesn't seem like it's power, but I told you the power is in the lead of the pencil, if you will, not the end of the barrel of the gun. You're not going to shoot Kovid, and you're not going to shoot the orders and the rules that people believe that empower are going to come and harm you. But lawmakers have to go to the court to sue for this Governor Jim Justice to shut down what they say here is improper. That he has unilaterally used the emergency powers clause in the state code to issue a de facto laws during the pandemic, like ordering businesses closed, but has not brought the legislature into the fold. That's totally irrelevant. My point, when the fraud is that this stuff doesn't exist. If you hear closely, they agree to the fraud that COVID is caused by a communicable anything. Let me touch this business close, because this is going to come up if I can get to it. Businesses are property, folks. They're not just a business. They're somebody's property. Those of you business people, you know you're a different thought as well. Small business people are a different mind. You know it's a property, and you know they're stealing it from you, and I'm telling you it's by fraud. Why aren't you stepping up for yourself? Why do you wait to get yourself beat down or your customers to come along and berate you for not doing what the governor's imposing the governor's fraud when that order took your property without compensation on the front, let alone the fraud? Why aren't you stepping up as an American public, the heart and soul, if you will, the American entrepreneur, possibly with more money than other people, because of your intention. Why aren't you stepping up and defending yourself? Anyway, so businesses are right here ordering property to be disused is a takings. And then I hear people complaining the government's corrupt and there's no constitution and all this other stuff, and I hear crickets where they should be stepping up. Nobody stepped up with it privately for themselves on a writ of habeas corpus. Nobody added that was interfering with their property and that the imposition was a takings of the property. Where are you enforcing your code, your law, your constitution, your organic laws, not even the code or the statute, the organic provisions that were to be secured to you, not to secure you out of? Help us sue the West Virginia governor over his new COVID tyranny, the civilrightslawyer.com. I'm going to forego the word civil rights at this point because you know my feeling on that. This guy sounds like a good guy. I just want to point out that he is going at the fight. And I'll run back through here a statement you're going to hear. It's going to be a couple minutes long from a video where the gentleman, where you're going to hear this Governor Justice talk about his egg-sucking mask order that's not supposed to be placed on anybody. You'll hear the attorney here that's trying to push back explain a bit of that. I want you to hear how that is by the video that he makes. The civilrightslawyer.com attorney explains the condition, and notice when you push back, they step back. And I want you to hear this very carefully. Listen to what sounds to be like maybe a plausible reason. Oh, just help us help everybody else. They have no authority to put that on you, and no authority to protect people that are not. No authority to protect anybody. The doctors have to protect those under the guidance of a communicable disease if they find it. Everybody else is out of this, but no one stepped up to say it. But let me show you what this gentleman is coming forward, maybe a real lawyer. And I think I got this from my dog Rex. Thank you for the insight to see that this guy's out here. That he goes through federal court, and I've told you not be careful about doing that because your writ of habeas is local. Don't use federal law. Do not do that for a habeas. This gentleman does it a different way. But again, we haven't talked, I don't know much about it, but he is someone who has an insight and how he knows that what they're doing is not proper. I want you to hear it. Here it goes on the video. It'll be a few minutes long here as we run it.
We can't have a food fight over something as simple as this egg-sucking mask.
Governor Justice.
That's all there is to it. We can't have a food fight over this. I mean, sure, it's an inconvenience. I don't like it either. But for crying out loud, we don't need a food fight over something to where somebody is standing up on a soapbox trying to get you to believe that if they make you wear a mask, they're going to take your guns. They're going to absolutely come and invade your house. I mean, really? Really? Do you really believe such a thing as that?
This is what was reported this past Friday. The governor also warned that if business owners don't enforce his rules, quote, the next step will have to be closure. Justice also signaled law enforcement, citing conversations with legal counsel. If patrons don't follow the order, Justice told business owners to call the police. And if someone isn't following the mask mandate, they're obstructing justice, Justice said. The governor also said an obstruction of justice charge would apply to business owners and operators that are flaunting the rule. So now, after all of the outrage, especially by myself on Friday evening and this weekend, he changes his tune on Monday, and now as of Monday, well, of course I don't have the ability to create new laws under which people can be arrested. But we all just need to wear a mask. Can't we just do it? He directed law enforcement to make arrests, not only of people not wearing masks, but also business owners and operators who didn't enforce his mask order. And he called it obstructing justice, which is not even a law in West Virginia. But obstructing an officer is, and it has 1 year in jail as a maximum potential sentence. Then you have the state attorney general finally step in after the governor backpedaled in his live broadcast on Monday, finally admitting that he doesn't have the power to have people arrested. And here's what the attorney general said. Important update. Governor Justice just said that he does not have the right to legislate or deem criminal charges on people. We agree and elaborate further on this issue. Let's be clear. No one is going to send people to jail, and that simply should not be occurring with respect to the governor's executive orders. As many of you know, I weighed in against going after the barbershop owner in Berkeley County because it represented overreach. We will continue to weigh in similarly if such a fact pattern arises again. So there you have it from both the governor and the West Virginia Attorney General that you can't be legally arrested for violating the West Virginia governor's executive orders. And the Attorney General mentions the barbershop owner. And this guy, actually, let's take a look at that. I talked to him today because he is going to be one of the plaintiffs in our next lawsuit against the governor.
Okay, that's where I'm going to go. You can listen to the rest. It's a few more minutes long, quite a few minutes more long explanation. Did you hear that he says he has no authority, and at least one state's attorney general says that there's no authority? Now, what do you do with that? You don't live in that state? Well, I think you should track this down. I saw the post. It looks like a Twitter post, but it's longer, so I'm not quite sure the source. Find out what the statement is from the attorney general of that state, and you collect that up together, and you turn around to your state of a governor that's kind of beat you down and kill you without authority, because it's all the same law, it's all the same authority generally. You make a record, start a record. How do you have any more authority than this governor over here? You're talking about emergency orders. This is the bifurcation that they've done between a local health communicable disease, and then the governor's just taking the mantle of absolute dictatorship under discretion. No, it doesn't exist, but everyone seems to give it. You can take this now, and you bring that one attorney general has said the governor has no actual authority. What's the position? Do you continue the fraud, or are you going to? Do you agree? Whatever you want to say, focused on the point. You're not helpless. If we didn't have all this before, if you didn't hear it from the guy behind the woodshed, here we have people that are in high places, a bar member no less, saying, yeah, the governor doesn't have, we are not going to prosecute. The attorney general is the judicial branch officer for the prosecution of crime in that state. The highest. And so, power here. I appreciate what this gentleman's doing, this attorney. Sorry I don't have his name. But this is the things we have to work with. We can move forward. For those of you that are interested to extricate yourself, you get a feel for the background. The lawsuit is placed into on the internet. I've got you a link. It'll be in the blogcaster. The egg-sucking mask he talked about is really irrelevant, but it's what they do. And then I ran across what's interesting. They'll do it in other places. You won't hear it in the beacon of freedom and justice in the United States that the governments will tell you this. But over in the UK, you can look on the government's website, and they'll explain about so-called face coverings. And guess what? They're not really mandatory. And they actually give you the forms to have to fill out. And then they say, but you're not supposed to be demanded to have these forms. So even the UK, the most locked down place I know, second to maybe to Australia, and maybe even now Kazakhstan, has in their provisions, right for you from a website, which you'll have a link, a page that'll tell you, give you the documents, to print them out, on how you don't have to wear masks. And it says, this page explains when to wear a face covering, exemptions from wearing one, and how to make your own face covering. I'm not going to talk about the fact that the face coverings are killing you, are false security, and actually aerosolizing more bacterial infection, which is what killed people, right? The Spanish flu wasn't the Spanish flu virus that killed people. It was the bacterial infection that came with it. So let's keep all this stuff straight on how this works. You'll get all the documents on this link. Not for your state. It's for the UK government. But why couldn't you just take this? And I haven't really thought through how you'd use this, but I would use it this way. Well, here's what the West Virginia Attorney General said. Here's what the governor there was mandating. Here's the UK that says, here's all the forms we filled out so that we don't have to wear the mask, and it's not mandatory. In what authority in this state that you live in do you have more power? Show me where you have more power than this, and that your orders are more powerful than these exemptions. Would be an interesting notice that you put down in order to begin the record to protect yourself. If you don't want to try and eliminate the unwarranted restraint of liberty on you. This page explains, it says, the face coverings are, not even masks. How stupid this really is. But their role in reducing transmission of coronavirus, COVID-19, the settings in which they are recommended, and how they should be safely used and stored. The information is based on current scientific evidence and is subject to change. Well, that's pretty feeble scientific evidence, do you think? We just don't know. Just do it 'cause, right? Just 'cause, not just cause. Moving on, exemption cards and badges as a header. Some people may feel more comfortable showing something that says that they do not have to wear a face covering. This could be in the form of an exemption card, badge, or even a homemade sign. This is a personal choice and is not necessary in law. Do you hear that? Having an exemption card is not necessarily necessary in law, they say in the UK, a place they've locked everybody down. If you would like to use an exemption card, you can use the PDF attachments on this page. Those who have an age, health, or disability reason not to wear a face mask covering should not be routinely asked to provide any written evidence of this. Written evidence includes exemption cards. And they have all this dates and things that you go through, and it says here that you should not be asked. And you cannot be questioned. And normalization of ignorance knows how he was. And I haven't heard back on the ramifications of what happened and where he went with that. They are asking. There's no authority for it. When you know that and you turn into the fact of what authority are you using, what color of authority are you using to commit a felony against me, is your response to anybody who would demand it. Now, I don't expect that they're going to understand that, and I'm not saying you need to get in a fight, because that's probably the thing you're going to get into, is the ignorant population. But where the UK is locking down their whole country over this, and yet there is exemptions for this, how is the United States of America any less the place that an exemption wouldn't work, and presumed, not as a question, which is what they do. I got this information from a Dr. Vernon Coleman, and I'll give you another link to a website where he has bunches of links for lots of information. He's, I think, an old man in a chair. I think he does his videos. Very kindly old gentleman with lots of very good insight that I think you need to hear. But more importantly, he's got directions for things like that UK government approved, if you will, PDFs for printout for use for exemptions, where they claim they're just recommendations and you can't be pressured about them. And that's partly what my addressment to anybody is or would be, though I haven't had to experience it too much. Like I said, I don't get out a ton, and it may be coming more pressure, as I noted. I don't know if you noticed, right after the election, it really started to come even more. So, don't know about that correlation, but it sure seemed like it, just more. Going on, State Supreme Court again suspends jury trials, says some attorneys, litigants with COVID have come to court. So this is a Tennessee Supreme Court has put down a new order, again suspends jury trials in face of the exemptions, in face of the fact of the fraud. The Tennessee Supreme Court puts down a new order. The court cited a significant increase in COVID-19 cases and said it had learned that some of the attorneys and litigants with the deadly virus had appeared in open court. The order says court proceedings should be handled through such a means as a conference, video conferencing as much as possible. A requirement that all who enter the courtroom wear a face mask covering remains in effect. The order says on March 13th, 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court declared listen, folks, the Supreme Court Justice declared a state of emergency. Go run to your constitutions. Is there anywhere an ability for the Supreme Court Justice to declare an emergency? For the judicial branch of Tennessee government, activity on continuity of operations plans for the courts of Tennessee. The state of emergency constitutes a disaster for purposes of Tennessee Supreme Court Code 49 and 21-116. Doesn't matter. Go read those statutes. You don't see any authority. When you go look at what they're supporting, there's no authority for what they're doing. They've also established something. You think the court of law would be looking for evidence of its ability to make the declaration in law and fact. And you'll see all that omission. That's a fraud by omission. It means this state and this court system is already compromised. I told you before, we're in a constitutional crisis. This is how you start to expand on it. So how do you expect to go there, and how do you get justice in a system that's already now got to protect its own property, the property of their decision? Not going to be very likely, so that's why you have to have if you're going to do these things, you have to anticipate that, and you may have to have something in your discussions or your petitions in order to counter a bit of that. At any rate, so this is the battlefield that you're in. Now, everybody, I guess, is a dictator in their prospective branch to make declarations of emergencies without facts, without hearing, without trial, without a thing. And they totally throw your communicable disease statutes under the bus, which is the objective basis the legislature declared to protect and secure you from overreach. So here the law branch is supposed to be following the law itself and doesn't. Is not a good sign. So when I'm talking about this, if you don't think I already know the bloody war that could be sitting there that appears inevitable to most people, I'm trying to tell you how we're going to avoid this. Yes, it's there. We are an occupied people. There's the proof. How are you going to deal with that? And most people would just go blah, blah, and throw it away. Oh, it's too much trouble. And that is allowing these people to come on to the next hard thing, and you're just going to see people. The destruction is happening. And I'm not going to be able to get to all that, but you're watching the destruction happen because no one's stepping up for themselves. Small business in particular, I'm really disappointed in for themselves. Maryland governor expands COVID-19 snitch line, says no constitutional right to go maskless. What authority does he have to say that when when he hasn't certified to the infectious agent? He's promoting a fraud. Does he have the constitutional right to promote an authority through fraud? Do you say yes or no? And if you say no, why are you not addressing that and hitting him with that problem and forcing him to expose? He just said a fraud. Are you going to move a habeas to shut that down in him? Or are you going to continue to cry, to continue to complain? I mean, I don't know. But it's right there. He says right there, if you know what you're looking at, he's committing open fraud and threatening you with a constitutional violation that doesn't even exist for him to impose. And I bet if I sat and thought about it, about a constitutional right about not wearing a mask, if it's going to kill me, he doesn't have a right to impose something that would kill me. He doesn't have a right to impose something that he was breaching his trust and his duty through the Constitution to secure to me the very thing he's taking from me. So, how are you going to have, what word in your mouth do you have to protect yourself? It's all right here. They tell you in the news what to do, and I don't see many people talking about that. Now, I was going to go on to another story. We're going to run out of time here about the Supreme Court ruling for religious groups. That people are calling that a win. It's the same problem. It's not a win. They agree the fraud is something. The law officers will not call it out. In fact, they give the power to these executive branch hoodlums and criminals. And you're allowing that. The religious groups were allowed to be compliant with the law of the Kovid, not that they challenged it, and the Supreme Court agreed. Grimner, thank you for running RealLibertyMedia.com. Thank you for what you do there. I'll be with you in Sound Minds and Normalization of Ignorance and Minds and BitChute and all you folks. Thank you very much. I'll be with you next week. Tech diffs or nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.